I have no idea. Thank you though, Tash Gordon. I might look into it if it comes up, if we get there. But yeah, like, and he started taking his fucking camera out and filming him and be like, "Oh, under what law?" and shit like this. So I was like, "Bro, you're not fucking Malcolm X, like Jesus." Yeah, it was just much easier to give the guy to just be like, "Yeah, here's my name. Fucking take care. Good luck." But yeah, that was just kind of annoying.
Do it off camera because it's annoying to set up my camera on this.
Soy. Oh, the fucking volume.
How you doing, man?
Does he have a compressor over his entire fucking desktop audio? Like over his entire thing? It sounds so smashed. It sounds like it's had the shit beaten out of it. Actual brick wall of sound.
Well, how are you?
I'm doing good. You know, just pretty much just doing this Hassan arc.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm depending on how long this lasts. I have a separate thing that it's very convenient.
You see the Israeli polls on Gaza? What, the one that says like 80% of them want to fucking kick everyone out? Is that right? Yeah, I saw that. I don't really know how it gels with other polls that say that they would end the war now in exchange for the hostages. Like that there's 70% of them, but fuck me, eh? Israelis. Can both be true? Maybe. Are they just fucking yes-manning everything that they think will make things stop? I don't know. Oh. Oh. Fuck off.
That this also came up because I had a second thing that I really wanted to talk to you specifically about, which is the nationwide injunctions and like what your thoughts are on that. Because I don't know enough about the consequences of nationwide injunctions and the pros and the cons and like.
Yeah, there was another one that said they support killing everyone in captured areas. There was like 50% said yeah. What? So if you capture an area, just fucking mow them all down. Again, I'm like. That just sounds so at odds with them saying not too long ago that they want to end the war in exchange for getting the hostages back. It's bizarre. Very bizarre. But you know, people will choose the ones that they like and go fucking tits with it. The poll is manipulatively framed. Well, if it's manipulatively framed, let's have a look at it. Hell yeah. I am wondering, yeah, like what's the fucking the phrasing of these things, but
all of that stuff, because there was a whole bunch of talk about that I thought was really interesting, but I have no idea how to digest it. But yeah,
100%. You can do both. Would you want to start with the injunctions, or do you want to start with Hassanabi?
Let's start with Hassan. And
sure, was the poll done in Hebrew and then translated to English? I'm guessing it was, right? Probably that's the case with most of them. What's this? You emailed Haaretz to get the polls. What, is there not an original Hebrew of the poll? Again, stream suggestions. If you have the original wording of the poll and we can look at how it was phrased. Sheer had issues with it. Yeah, but Sheer won't talk on stream, so, you know.
let's finish on the injunctions.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Hit me.
All right. So based on what, or actually, do you want to tell me what your opinion is on Hassan's detainment?
Oh, yeah.
So I basically think the following. I think that Hassan was detained. I have to say this because a lot of people seem to disagree with some base facts or first principles. I think it's more likely than not Hassan was detained. I think that Hassan probably either lied, exaggerated, was wrong, or whatever you want to say. More likely than not, I would say deliberately exaggerated / lied about the amount of time that his detainment took. I think that Hassan generally probably is upplaying, you know, the story in general.
Okay. I've got the poll here. I don't know if anyone's already looked at it, but it's not that long. Who do I trust to read this? Because I can just PDF it to you. I would actually need a Hebrewoid to read this with me. I'd need a Hebrew speaker. If they can do it. Just give me a message and I will send it to you. Maybe I'll get more than one of you so you can argue about what it actually means, because that might happen too. It'll be like having the Arabic translations.
I think it's more likely than not that either he was pulled over, that is to say detained, he was questioned, or the series of questions had to do with viewpoint discrimination. That is, but for his viewpoints on Trump and Israel-Palestine, he was either stopped, questioned, or the specific line of questioning was initiated. And in other words, I think that some part of this encounter constituted viewpoint discrimination.
Okay.
That's bad.
All right. Okay. So let's first define detainment under that, because depending on how we define some of these things, we'll kind of structure the conversation. So as I've seen at least some of his speech about his detainment, it seems like it's questionable whether or not he could have left at any period of time. What is your... It seems like at one point in the retelling of the story, he says, like, am I detained? Like, can I just go? And then he seems
Louder
to imply
music.
that the
Hell
conversation
yeah.
just ended there.
Does it
then he
end
could
at any
leave.
point? Or is it fading out?
So
Yeah. So
what's he doing?
go ahead.
So I'll start by, you asked me, like, let's define detainment. I take detainment to be what's known as a constitutional seizure, and that basically is I take
The
to
crates
be
are inside the
two
cave.
kind of
Oh
elements,
no,
which
I'm
is
gonna die.
did the police
Message you.
put you under a reasonable apprehension that you were not free to go? Basically, it just I can boil that down to one element.
What, Twiggy? Is that you? Okay. Okay, let's see. Wait, where's the original now? Did I even... Where the fuck is it? I can't find it now. What the fuck? Why can't I find it? Who sent it to me? Did I delete a message? What the fuck? Oh, it was sent in the Discord. Okay. Gotcha. Thank you, Reese. Download. Okay. Open. All right, here you go.
Element for now. I've reserved the right to add another element, as I recall my con law. But basically, if the police or any kind of government official is putting you in a reasonable apprehension that you are not free to go, I would consider you to be detained. Yeah.
So when you say reasonable apprehension, to be clear, are you just saying like the average person would reasonably assume that you're not free to go? Or what do you mean?
Correct. So for example, if a cop pulls a gun on you and says, "Don't move," right?
Yeah.
A crazy person who doesn't understand guns, doesn't understand causality, would just be like, whatever. I mean, I'm free. I'm free as a bird, and they don't really understand anything. Notwithstanding that, like, particular person has a kind of esoteric, or I should say, idiosyncratic vision of guns and of being under arrest and of what they do. A reasonable person in that situation would feel that they are not free to go. They don't have the freedom of liberty to go where they want to go. Likewise, if you're pulled over by a police, right? You'll say you're pulled over by a cop. A reasonable person in that situation, when there's lights behind you.
How safe are we in this cave, guys? How safe is this cave? This looks like a horrible cave to be in, but we'll see.
Cop is pulling up to your door, is not under a reasonable, does not believe that they are free to go in that moment, that they have the freedom of movement. There could be some edge cases, but I believe that
a
person in Hassan's position, being stopped at the border, specifically for questioning, for what the government admits is an inspection, would not feel that they are free to go, and so therefore he was detained and under arrest. Now, because Hassan later on is supposing, or he's like saying, I guess I could have, tried to stop the cops from detaining me if I just like brought up some things. That's him speculating, number one, and it doesn't really matter because in the moment when he was being questioned, he had been put into reasonable apprehension that he was not free to go. And as point of fact, later on, the government admitted that they did inspect him and then quote unquote released him. And so under my definition, I think it fits. Under what the government is purporting to say, I think it matters. I don't think that Hassan's after encounter speculations matter for whether or not he was detained.
Well, what I'm referring to was a statement that he at least claims that he made to the person. And
oh yeah, so once he asked that question and the cop says you are, or the ICE officer or DHS officer, sorry, CBP officer says he's free to go, at that point I think he's no longer detained.
Okay.
But he's detained before
so it is from your position that he was detained the entire time, and when he asked if he could go, because I think what he said was like he asked if he could go, and then there was a little bit of like back and forth, and
yeah,
he ultimately just like left. I don't think he directly said you're free to go, but like there was some back and forth, and then he left, and there was some speculation as to whether or not he was properly detained, I guess.
Yes. So when the government is being a little bit weird about it, or whether or not he says it directly, and then they later like have some either body language or signaling or whatever implicit thing that signals to him that he can go, at that point, I don't think he's detained anymore. But I think any reasonable person in Hassan's shoes in the prior situation would believe that they don't have the freedom of liberty to go. And the mere fact that afterwards the government's being a little cagey about whether the detainment was proper.
Oh yeah. Also, if you're going to ask for this poll, if you want to ask for the original poll in Hebrew, it's not that long. I'd rather you asked if you were prepared to also come on stream and explain each of the questions to me. Thank you.
Whether or not he was ever under a detainment or an arrest, that for me doesn't matter. What matters is what did the police do? What did the CPP officers do? And whether a reasonable person would feel as though that they were free to go in that moment. And I guess I'll put the question. I'll ask the question to you, Relly. Do you think that if the customs officer pulls you aside and says, "Hey, we need to bring you to another room and ask you some questions," would you feel that a reasonable person thinks that they're free to go?
No, I don't think a reasonable person would believe they're free to go.
Yeah.
No.
So I therefore think that he was detained.
Okay. So I personally, as for the
did people disagree that he was detained at all? I don't recall that, but okay.
Detainment, I'm not sure if, like, for me,
maybe Raleigh does.
When I'm looking at detainment, I would look more at like the kind of.
That's why I would say that with that fucking settler overlord, I would say I was detained because he took our passports and wouldn't give them back, and he had a gun. So it's like you're not really. How free to leave are you when he's got your fucking your ticket to the country, with a little bit of paper that is basically like your entire lifeline, and he's got a gun, and you're in dangerous territory. So yeah, that's why I say I was detained. Easy. No fucking question. Where's the poll? You have to DM me on Discord or go into the LonerBox Discord and find it in stream suggestions. Someone linked it there. Discord.gg/LonerBox. Thank you.
Like history and stuff, or the context of how that is typically conducted, like a CBP interview. I have no idea personally how like it's typically conducted if you are technically detained, because I've never been out of the country. I've never been interviewed in such a manner, so I actually don't know if this would, like, you're free to leave at any.
You were more kidnapped than detained, honestly. What? Because he wasn't like an official or anything.
Time or not, I would assume.
What do you take to be detainment? So what do you mean by when you say I don't know if that would qualify as detainment or something like that? What do you think?
Like
is?
For instance, if a cop were to say, "Hey, come here, I want to ask you some questions," I would assume I'm not detained.
Oh, so Raleigh isn't actually sure if he's being detained.
Like
I would have
he
to.
was.
They're bringing me.
He's still technically not even in the United States, right? He's at the border, technically. Not the line on the map, but he's at the border, right? Did you report that incident? No. No, because we were also being a bit naughty because Corey was pretending to not be an Israeli. So he was trying to go into Area A, which he's not supposed to. Yeah.
I would say the only material difference here would be, the substantial material difference here would be the past context of whether or not, I guess this is like a typical detention. I genuinely do not know. When CBP pulls you off to the side, I don't know if you're free to leave. Like, that's my main thing about like detainment is, if I just walk away, can they do anything? Right?
Well,
can they do anything if I just walk away?
That's like whether you're actually free to go. But let me give you an example. So you gave one of the cop. I think it's a good example of the kind of ambiguities that cops will rely on to try to get people to give away their rights. So imagine instead that in your situation, your hypothetical, the cop says, "Come over here and answer some questions."
LonerBox, why not do some reading on what is considered a detention center at a border checkpoint? Because I've done my reading. It's called the University of Being a Fucking Life Experience Based Gigachad Arnold Schwarzenegger. What do you want me to say? What? Bro, I'm joking. Maybe I will one day if this discourse ever fucking continues.
Questions and commands it like that.
Yeah.
Do you think that you're free to go?
I would assume not. No, I would assume not. No.
But say the cop is just being sketchy and he would act, if the guy just went away, he would move on, right? So in actuality, right, the person, if he left, there would be no consequences. But he's trying to make that guy be like a little afraid, and so he does that. Notwithstanding the fact that if the guy could, that is to say, like the suspect or whatever, could actually.
Chad, thanks for the 999. If a reasonable person wouldn't feel free to leave, they have been detained. The question is merely whether your rights are the same as in a CBP situation versus detention by local law enforcement. Okay. Why? Because you're technically not in the country when you're at one of these interviews, right? Is that what you're getting at? Like, you technically haven't crossed the border yet? You're at the border? This is called Customs and Border? Okay.
Walk away scot-free. I think that we would consider that detainment under like normal American constitutional jurisprudence, notwithstanding the fact that he could actually go if he wanted to and not face any consequence. I think it's pretty much, for me, an easy case at the airport, because at the airport people assume kind of that your rights mean less. Now, some of your rights, there are some exceptions and some shortcuts that people can go for some of your rights in the airport, and so people kind of just assume that they just follow the direction of.
He said ICE detained him. So ICE does detain people at airports. Like they can do that. They've done that. But I don't know if he gave any indication that these people themselves were ICE. For all I know, he probably just said ICE to make it sound more fucking brutal, right? To give all the connotations of ICE, because ICE are quite fucking shit.
A CBP customs officer, and so I take kind of any instruction, but hey, step aside, hey, stay right here, don't, or hey, we got to take you into questioning. I think most people would be under reasonable apprehension that they're not free to go, and I think that's what matters, right? Whether or not he could have actually stepped up and got out, for me, isn't the key test for whether or not you're detained. It's what the officers are doing that would put a reasonably apprehensible person, aware of on notice about whether or not they're free to go or not. That's what I think is the key test.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree, but I think the that specific distinction would cause for more of a judgment as to whether or not there is a misuse of or a deliberate attempt to obfuscate what the authority or the bounds of the authority of the officer is, right? That's what I would say is more of like kind of at the discretion there, less like kind of some idea of like like is the detention, or is it proper to question somebody or not? It's more of whether or not the illusion of detention is properly deployed or not. Like, is it?
I would actually define detention as that, as someone who's been put in reasonable apprehension that they're not free to go. That is what I would define as the detention itself. Now, you could say, so I would have an additional concept, which is like, I don't know, physical custody, where someone is in actual physical custody, and
custody.
Actually is exercising control over that individual, maybe. But I would define the detention as that reasonable apprehension that someone is not free to go. And so regardless of whether or not the cop, in his subjective mindset, if asked, would say move along, go, get out of here, I would still say that you're notwithstanding that detained. Similar to, let's say that the cop, like a totally irresponsible cop, is just has a gun, his hand on his gun, which is out of its holster, and says, "Hey, Raleigh, come over here," and he's actually has no intention whatsoever of keeping you in jail or arresting you. And actually, if you said "fuck you, cop" and walked away, he would do nothing, right? And so in that situation, you are actually free to go, right? You're actually free to go. Would you think that you're being detained in that moment, and that you are?
Would I reasonably interpret what I'm?
Yes.
I would reasonably interpret that I was being detained if a cop said those things to me. But if I walked away and they did nothing, I would say that my assumption was incorrect. I wasn't detained. They just wanted to make it appear as though I was detained.
This fucking music, man. Holy shit.
I'm going to try not to be
so
circular.
powerful.
I'm not going to say, do you reasonably fear that you're detained? What I'm going to ask you is...
This is an interrogation theme, June. Both of these guys are being detained. Fuck.
Do you think that person who is responding to that cop with a hand on the gun, do you think that person is detained?
Do I think they are detained?
Yeah.
I guess what I'm drawing is a separation between the legality of detainment, like the actual validity of
Lana, thanks for £5. Really appreciate that.
Detainment versus the perception of detainment. And that's kind of the distinction that I guess I'm drawing here.
Okay.
Is that the perception is that, of course, you're detained. Like, no reasonable person, like nobody is going to assume that they're not detained. But the validity of that detainment would be in question. But either way, I don't think this is super material to the discussion, because as I've seen you have this discussion before, you refer to pretty consistently like viewpoint discrimination based on what Hassan has said. So in your mind, because it sounds like in one of the conversations at least that there are some
Hey Corey, thanks for the $5. Really appreciate that. Detain this. We're one super chat off the goal. 5 minutes to go. Wow, we might actually achieve the first goal of the stream, you guys. Wow. You're so well behaved, folks. What the hell?
Amendment speech, protected speech that you can do that would warrant a like questioning from like some entity, right? Or from CBP in this instance, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So, for example, if it's First Amendment protected speech to say, "Hey, I contracted."
Don't jinx it. One more dono in 5 minutes, mate. If that's not possible, then you guys can be. Look at that. I never doubted you for a second. Thanks to the $5, Barabbas. Thank you so much. Detained for the goal. Hell yeah. Dwayne, there's an extra $5. Give me confetti. Hey, well. Not bad, chat. Not bad. Oh, shit. Mike from PA said I can perform citizens' detainment, so just detain them back. That was unbelievable, man, that fucking reading. What a funny fuck.
What they're talking about is super important for police interaction in the US. This is why police will often avoid answering the question, "Am I detained?"
Thanks for $10, Dawson. I know for when you're within the country, and definitely if you're a citizen, I'm pretty sure like you don't have to tell the police anything. Like if they want to search your car, if they want to fucking ask for your details on the streets, like I'm pretty sure you can just say no to everything. Now whether or not they would abuse you anyway is maybe a different question, but legally, I think your rights in America are just to shut the fuck up Friday until they go away. But then there's like, do they not get to say they got probable cause or some shit? Yeah. I don't really even know. In the UK, if you swear at a police officer, you can get in trouble. Like they can fuck you up for that. It's like hostility and shit. Andrew, thanks for $5. I think I missed the answer to a question I asked yesterday. Still take $5. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, it's probably your fault for leaving when you should have stayed to hear the answer to your question. Wow, fuck. You can't leave if they claim detainment. So if they say you're being detained, then you have to stay. Okay. Barabbas, thanks for the $5. JD Vance performed a citizen's arrest on Mike from PA's couch. F's in the chat. Ew.
A virus.
I don't know, man. Some people just love to LARP it as well. Like, I had a friend once, and we were sitting on a bench outside, and it was fairly late, just chatting, and these cops came up to us and they said that, oh, there's been some like burglaries in the area. So we just like, would it be okay if we just took your details? You know, just as a like a whatever check. And then I didn't really care that much. I was just like, fine. But then my friend really did not want to give his details to this guy at all. Not he not because he committed crimes or anything, but just because I guess he just thought he was being like fucking his rights infringed upon or whatever. And then they start arguing for ages. And the cop was like, he'd been doing this for like 25 years, so he kind of knew how to deal with it, and he was never gonna fucking back down. And the lady cop who was with him was being very good copy and shit like that, trying to turn us against each other because she went to me and she was like, listen, you seem all right. I just don't know what's wrong with your friend. And I'm just sitting there like, yeah, I agree. I'm probably not going to say anything, though.
Once hold of Humanitarian Law Project gets misrepresented by Pisco.
I have no idea. Thank you, though, Tash Gordon. I might look into it if it comes up, if we get there. But yeah, like, and he started taking his fucking camera out and filming him and be like, oh, under what law and shit like this. So I was like, bro, you're not fucking Malcolm X. Like, Jesus. Yeah, it was just much easier to give the guy, to just be like, yeah, here's my name. Fucking take care, good luck. But yeah, that was just kind of annoying. I think most of the time it's probably, depending on where you are, most of the time it's probably just okay to comply with police, just because it's like, even if they're not doing it for a good reason, it's like if you've got nothing to hide, you might as well just tell them, like, because they'd know anyway if they needed to find out. Sovereign citizens, yeah. That was it. It was a fight that just wasn't worth it. Now, obviously, there are times, like, say, during protests and all that, where you do need to know how to deal with cops because they will just try to take the piss. Like, they might try, like, if they try to touch you, but you don't consent for them to put their hands on you and shit like that. If they have a probable cause, that's, like, a very valid thing, but, Are you planning on doing a deeper dive into the white genocide South Africa stories? There's no deep dive. There is rising resentment in South Africa because of ANC corruption and because of the persisting inequality that's left over from apartheid. That has resulted in radical left-wing groups like the Economic Freedom Fighters becoming more popular, and they do have very violent rhetoric about killing Boers and all this shit. But that's also overlapping with the fact that South Africa is still, at the end of the day, an African country where there's a lot of crime. So, as an overlapping of these two things, some white farmers are getting hurt. That's it. Like, they're getting killed, they're getting attacked. Some of it is for racial, political reasons, and others is just because it's crime, because people who are doing a robbery and people who would just as well commit crimes against black people too. The overwhelming majority of murder victims in South Africa are black, like thousands upon thousands a year in that country, because like less than like every couple of years, maybe a couple of dozen are white, and some of them are racially motivated. Does not imply a white genocide. Get it? Fucking hell. That's the beginning and end of the investigation into South Africa, okay? If you think there's anything more to it than that, you're probably racist. Against white people. I don't know.
It's the West Nile virus or something, right? That's protected speech. You know, the government can't punish you for saying, I contracted the West Nile virus. But if the government detains you for that, or if the government asks you questions about that, you are not being detained or questioned or subjected to questions on the basis of your viewpoint regarding whether or not you know, it's a good thing that you contracted West Nile, whether or not, you know, your opinion about whether you have or don't have a disease. What they're stopping you for is for not the purpose of viewpoint discrimination, but the purpose of ascertaining like the health consequences of your entry into the country. Likewise, if Hassan had said something like, yeah, I met with you know, a Houthi representative and we exchanged some money and something in
Josie, thanks for the $19.99. That's so kind of you. Oh my god, thank you. And Davey, thanks for the $4.99. Take my money. I will. Yeah, don't mind if I do. You guys are so kind. Breaking me. Tearing me to shreds. I need to set a new goal because this is all superfluous. This is like, we've already done five more. Let's do a 10 goal. You go. Okay, come on. We have to game more aggressively. Okay, come on.
In Yemen,
Focus. Lock
as
in.
opposed to
Speed run.
him going to France or whatever, and you were being stopped to ask about that, right? There, you're not being questioned because you're pro Houthi or because, but because of the material support criminal. You know, it's a criminal action to material support a terrorist organization.
Oh no, no, the
that
marksman.
has been found under Holder versus
He's gonna
Humanitarian
outmarks
Law
me.
Project to not raise First Amendment concerns. It's an exception to the First Amendment. And so if he did that, if there was some evidence that he were materially supporting a foreign terrorist organization and you question about that for the purpose of aiding a criminal investigation, I also think that would not be viewpoint discrimination. What I take to be viewpoint discrimination is you're subjecting him to either to detainment or to questioning because you favor some views over other views. And that, I think, is what's going on, at least in one of the areas of constitutional analysis. That is to say, he would not be stopped or questioned about material support, but for his protected First Amendment speech.
Okay, so let's take the Houthi example, or let's imagine a hypothetical. That this is a separate hypothetical, but I'm curious if we had intelligence that showed that there was a known terrorist inside of an area speaking to individuals. And this individual was in an area with a lot of people, right? And Hassan was one of them. Would you say that if they didn't interview every single person, stop every single person who is, let's say there's 150 people, they didn't, and they're all coming through the airport at once, crazy hypothetical. They don't stop every single person, but they do stop Hassan on the basis of his favorability towards, let's say, it was a Houthi, right?
Luffy the Houthi.
Because of his First Amendment protected speech. Would you say that's illegitimate?
So if there is evidence, so this is the example that I'm taking, so I just want to make sure I understand it. There's evidence that there is a person in an area, right?
Correct.
A Houthi person.
Correct.
And you don't have evidence that he met with anybody, right?
Correct.
Or do you?
You do not.
And okay. And the only thing, and you're stopping people along the border, and you only have Hassan's previous statements about the Houthis. Yes, I believe it would be viewpoint discrimination to stop Hassan only, or to target Hassan and say we're definitely going to stop this guy because previously he's voiced support for the Houthis. So yes, I do take. Now, if there's some additional indicia that there was a meeting that took place there, and that there was a U.S. citizen who had a meeting with that specific Houthi in that specific place, maybe you have a stronger case. But it would be as though, like, so I'll give you another example. Suppose that there's the same example, but now there's only, everyone's coming back and there's only one Muslim, and you say let's stop that Muslim because he's more likely to have met with that Houthi. What would you say there?
Well, I would say that that's illegitimate, but that's because being Muslim doesn't have the correlation with whatever it is that you're trying to catch. In this case, it would be terrorist actions.
Wait,
Doesn't it? Yeah, it does. What the fuck?
Houthis are
no,
Shia
actually, no. Houthis are Houthis are mostly supported by white people in America. Sorry.
Muslims, right? So, or general, they're more likely to be Shia Muslims. So suppose there's a Shia Muslim.
Yeah, but you can also make the argument that they're like brown. Most of them are brown, so.
Yeah. Oh no, Riley's maybe not being very tight here. Just say that they're white. Come on, because that's just true.
Make that argument
like
too.
Jackson Hinkle,
yeah,
right? He went to hang out with the Houthis.
We would appeal to a reasonability.
But take it, right? So say for example, everyone is coming back as Christian, white Christian. They're all white Christians from Sweden, and there was there was a Houthi guy there, and then there's one Shia Muslim, one Shia Muslim who's is wearing traditional Islamic garb and is coming back.
Garb.
Does the government have a right to target that person and say, well,
Joseph
all these rest of
Garbles.
these people are Swedish, Nordic white people, and this guy's the one Shia Muslim coming back from a place where there was a leader of the Houthis. Could you stop him?
No, because
the
connection between what you wear and your religion is not strong enough in comparison to your stated out.
South Africa make false genocide claims, gets slapped with false genocide claims. Robot emoji, speedy emoji, man dancing emoji, man kneeling emoji, man kneeling emoji.
Wow, Thanks to $10, David. Yeah, I'm not gonna be. Yeah, if I ever game again, if I play this on stream, like wow, it'll be weekends or like maybe one day of the week, like Friday or something. Yeah, I'm not gonna make it like a regular part of the stream because I'm definitely much better at covering stuff when I'm not gaming. This is just me indulging for a bit. But thanks for the $10.
Outspoken political opinion.
Right. So I think that
What's this?
if we're talking about religion, you would say no, even though there's a degree of correlation. People who support the Houthis, you agree they're much more likely to be Muslim.
I don't know.
Would you agree
The
with that?
online left right now. I don't know. There's a
lot of white people.
White atheists.
Hell
right now
yeah.
Yeah, but they're-
might do you wrong on that one.
Socialists.
I understand
They're
the.
coming back from France, and under the circumstances, let's say even you think someone met with this Houthi or whatever, and all these rest other people, they're Swedish. The connection between Swedes and Houthis, that's got to be low propensity. And so
Yeah, no,
why
I
is
would
that this one
argue that
guy?
that's simply way too far down.
Why are you playing a 25-year-old game? Why are you on a 25-year-old fucking platform? What? Why are you living in a house that might well be over 25 years old?
The reasonable chain. I think what you have when you're talking about
Debate,
a guy
bro.
who said, America deserved 9/11, who said that like he has nothing wrong, he sees nothing wrong with what the Houthis are doing in the Red Sea, or no, he said everything that the Houthis are doing in the Red Sea is morally justifiable. It's like it's all right. He's gone on like. He's had a known Houthi who said he was a soldier on his stream and glazed. Like all these different things, I think we're getting far closer to any reasonable person's understanding of this person might support a terrorist organization in comparison to just somebody who's Muslim.
Okay, so I just want to make sure before we move on, though, to understand what your thoughts are about this. You do believe it's more likely than not that Hassan's stated views on the Houthi
Wow, I hate this poll, lol, just saying. Ooh. Really? Interesting.
or on America, you said like that America deserves 9/11, or all the craziest things he's saying about what's justified, what's not justified. You do think it's more likely than not that those specific views influenced either his stop, the fact that he was questioned, or the specific line of questioning, correct? You do think that
I truly
his
don't
viewpoints kinda
know,
went into
and
it.
my basis of ignorance is based on a lack of knowledge of how frequently people get pulled aside for stuff like this. I've heard a lot of people who are responding to this talk about how ridiculous this is because they get stopped all the time, get asked a bunch of weird questions all the time. This is incredibly common, and just like laughing at how common it is. So I've never been out of the country. I've never been through customs. That's never happened to me once. So I've never like personally experienced it, nor have I like looked up anything like it. If I had to say whether or not it's possible, it's definitely possible in this politically charged time that somebody recognized him and then pulled him aside. But I truly couldn't speak to the likelihood, even on his
likelihood.
retelling of the story, which, I mean, I would argue there's reason to be skeptical of his retelling of the story. I'm not certain.
Fucking quest log.
Yeah, no,
Oh, no.
I think that like people are stopped
Broken
for
just
stuff.
needs to go.
People
Oh,
are
this is
asked annoying questions. But assuming, right, that he were asked, do you support Trump? If he were asked that, would you agree that there's viewpoint discrimination going on? More likely than not?
More likely than not, or I don't know. I would have to see the whole conversation and how it went down. The way that he's retelling the
Tries to
story,
get there. Okay.
like in a hypothetical
Come on, quickly.
idea
No response.
where
Go.
he's
Go,
talking
go, go.
about how he's like, oh yeah, I just want to see where this goes. I want to see how far this I can take this. Like where he's offering up information that makes it sound like he frankly
he's gonna get attacked.
fucking hates the government and fucking hates America is what it sounds like. He's the types of information he's
Good.
offering up. Like, yeah, I could see him
Wait,
asking
what?
a
They
question
just
about Trump.
Okay, I thought they were gonna go past them.
Yeah, so
like
I
that
think
question maybe
yeah.
could elucidate or lead to maybe sympathies for like a Trump assassination attempt or something like that, like one of the assassinations attempts. I literally
Fuck,
don't
man.
know. I don't know where that could
Yeah.
lead, but
But if you're premising those lines of questioning, right? So it's possible a line of questioning about whether you support Trump could lead to someplace criminally productive. It also could not, right? But like the idea is, do you think that he would be asked those questions if he
Were he
were
not
a Trump
brown?
supporter,
Oh.
right? If he were a Trump supporter, would he be asked
That's a
whether
good
or not he
question.
supports the president?
if I mean, probably not, because they would just assume that he does.
Right. So they're subjecting him to this line of questioning, and additional burdens, in my opinion, because he takes a particular view. That is, he takes a particular view against Trump and against Israel. And my
Yeah, but isn't the argument that it should be equal then? So if someone is fucking around with Houthis a little bit, even in their own way, even just enough to arouse suspicion, like a bit of suspicion, then would it be justified to question them? It's like, well, yeah, but then say, well, what about Trump? But I would feel the same. Like, surely, like, security should be impartial. If someone was a January 6th supporter, they should probably also get questioned if they're like coming into the country, because you know they're like terrorists and shit. Oh God, can't stop, can I? Oh my God, I just wasted my fucking prep. Oh, for fuck's sake. Get her on me. Alright, okay, take this one. Okay, and then get this one on me. There we go. No problem. I just wasted my fucking cooldown reset by mistake. Ah! My God, she is smacking the shit out of me.
prior on that is informed both by the specific line of questioning, but also
Slapping me
because
around.
this is like this kinds of things are happening to people in the immigration context all over. So in the case of canceling student visas, they're literally looking up individuals using AI and search tools to find out who was responsible for an op-ed, right? In the Ozturk situation, they did
I think
similar
I think
situation
that's
with, like,
ridiculous.
yeah.
I think all of that is you know, obviously egregious, and I would agree with the strongest condemnations for that type of conduct. But I don't think that this meets merit. This just seems like what it genuinely, the way that it's been described to me and the way that I see it is, CBP pulled him aside. Whether they pulled him aside because of they recognized him or not, they pulled him aside. It's hard to tell. And then he was subjected to a line of questioning where he, it sounds like by his own admission, kind of smugly wanted to lead him down a dialogue tree where he seems to describe his latest hits, where he's
9/11.
like talking about essentially how much he doesn't like America and likes Houthis, had the Hezbollah, Hamas, and all these other things. He interviewed a Houthi, stuff like this, which is going to prompt more questioning. Seems like he just had political views. Yes, I agree, political views that would, I think, have a CBP officer be willing to, or interested in further questioning.
My prior on that is that the CBP officer probably knew where they were going, and it wasn't just like, oh, let's just pull on this tree a little bit and let's get to some questions about Houthis, right? I think that the CBP officer, in pulling on those specific strands, isn't doing so blind. And there's been many accounts of of them checking social media of individuals. And so I think more likely than not, they did check his social media, and therefore the line of question they're pursuing is based on Hassan's speech, at least in some context. Now you could say, but the reason I'm asking this is, although I wasn't sure I was going to get that response from you, I wanted to at least have some agreement with you that it's likely that they knew about his views prior to the questioning, that they were asking him about his views, not in ignorance, but they were pulling on strands which they largely knew that he had certain opinions, and that those opinions were anti-Israel and anti-Trump. That I think is the most likely situation.
Bro, how many fucking I'm trying to think of how many like anti-Israel people have had overlap with the GOP as well, though, right? Like the GOP still accepts people like Candace Owens and like Tucker Carlson and all these people. Is Tucker actually? I don't know if Tucker's pro anti-Israel. He feels like he would be, right? Like he would be going down that rabbit hole. Yeah, I don't really know if the GOP cares that much about anti-Israel types, but in their own side anyway. It would be the Trump thing. If it was actually because they were targeting someone for political disagreement, it would be because of Trump, and then they'd be using the Houthi and all the anti-Israel stuff as their excuse.
If I were to believe that he was pulled aside for questioning, I think none of it had to do with him being anti-Israel and anti-Trump. More of it had to do with the fact that this dude unironically on live in front of 200,000 people said kidnapping civilians is not a problem, shamed a person for saying that kidnapping civilians isn't an issue, praised the Houthis, then said everything that they are doing in the Red Sea is morally justifiable, and you're a Zionist if you think otherwise.
Is
that
speech
would be
protected
far
speech?
more likely that that's what caused it.
Is that speech protected if you said that?
We've already, yes, but we've already argued that protected speech can warrant questioning.
Not so by itself, no, right? So in the situation that you gave me, which there is a Houthi person in some place, and the person that you're targeting to stop is someone just based on their prior support for the Houthis in the United States, their statements. I answered you no.
Okay, so then let me give you a separate example. Let's say we have a 15-year-old kid who's going to school, and he praises online a bunch of school shooters. He says, oh my God, these are such great people. He talks about how, you know, he hates so many of the people at his school that are there, and he's really annoyed at all of his bullies, and he's just constantly giving praise to these school shooters. All of it's First Amendment protected speech. Should the police or FBI investigate him?
Yeah, so if you are, if you're praising a bunch of school shooters, again, the bar to investigations is really, really low. And if you take a dispositional attitude in favor of school shooters, then I think in general, because we have such a high protection of schools in this country, it might be viewpoint discrimination to institute some additional burden on him, but it might be justified under strict scrutiny, what's known in the compelling purpose test, if you impose some kind of burden on him. But I think you can investigate with very little.
The guy who wrote the article in Haaretz on the poll wrote a book that in Hebrew is named Dear Homeland, but in English it's called Dear Palestine. Interesting.
Rationale. But if you're imposing some burden on someone,
do you think it's improper if a cop sees that, let's say on social media, a cop his kid goes to the school, cop sees it on social media, sees the kid, do you think it's improper for him to be like, hey,
to stop him?
What's up?
No. I don't think it's improper for him to ask questions for a security rationale of the school, right?
Wait,
and there you're not, but I want to be clear about that.
Go ahead.
You would agree though, if and just you're raising concerns in the school context where First Amendment rights are much less. I want you to know that, right? So that there's a specific doctrine related to First Amendment schools that touches on, of kids.
We can throw out school. We can talk about a public place. It doesn't have to be a school, right?
Well, I just want to tell you, there's specific case law and doctrine on First Amendment as applied to schools where like kids have used Snapchat in a way that has disrupted school activities, and in general, governments are much more empowered to infringe or to take measures that to protect students or to
but isn't the same about airports as well? Isn't it like more so with airports? Aren't airports literally the place where you have like some of the least rights in America?
With respect to Fourth Amendment and like search and seizure, there's a exception for the Fourth Amendment, but you still have rights when it comes to
I'm not saying you don't have rights, but you're arguing you have less rights
just
in the
to
context
be
of
clear,
speech in a school. In an airport, I'm pretty sure you have like the least.
Just saying less rights isn't enough. That would justify stopping the Shia Muslim, right? Wait, that would justify stopping the Shia Muslim.
No, not less rights as in no rights, but your protections are lesser in an airport because you're making the appeal
with respect to the Fourth Amendment.
Okay, well, you're making an appeal that the specific like school is like a specific zone, I feel like that does the hypothetical a disservice. I feel like the hypothetical is based on any reasonable grounds that any normal person would look at that and be like, this person might shoot this place up or plant an explosive, right? It doesn't have to be a school. It can be just a random sidewalk where there's like crowded people, a mall, anything like that. And I'm sure we could find a hypothetical that doesn't have special cutouts for these certain protections. In your mind,
Yeah. So
if
so,
a
so in
cop
general,
sees,
so in,
so if a cop sees that you're posting on social media stuff that would have any reasonable person be very worried about the general public, but it's all First Amendment protected speech, you would say that it's illegitimate for that cop to bring that person aside and be like, hey, what's up? What's going on?
Yeah. So you're talking about a specific situation in which there are a bunch of like statements by an individual that cause concern in the general public, and largely that concern has to do with like, for example, interpreting them as threats. That's number one.
Sure.
And true threats are not protected under the First Amendment. But you're trying to carve it out and say, suppose that they're concerning statements that don't trigger inquiries under true threats, that don't trigger inquiries under the various exceptions to the historical exceptions of the First Amendment. In that case, am I against a policy that burdens those views more than other views? The answer is yes. And yes, that's true. So for example,
you would agree that you would view that as viewpoint discrimination.
Illegitimate. Yeah. So for example, in the context of a school shooter, I can see many.
I honestly don't really know what's happening in this conversation. Okay. You have less Fourth Amendment rights if you're at an airport, but you still have the First Amendment. But does that mean, like, do they not relate with each other? Wouldn't you... It's not First Amendment rights in the sense that you can get criminally charged for First Amendment, but in terms of like what your threshold for being questioned, that would be different, wouldn't it? Because if you're in an airport, there was that story about it was 2000s where some woman was like scanning some suitcase in security and bantering with the guy, and she was like, "Oh, careful! I've got like 3 bombs in there." LOL. Okay, and then she got detained and arrested. It was like, that's obviously a joke, and you can say that joke anywhere you want with free speech, but obviously if you say it in a fucking airport, you're gonna get in trouble. Like, even though it's First Amendment, but because your Fourth Amendment right is compromised in that security situation, then that would probably overlap with your First Amendment right as well. Like, they're not like completely separate in like different fucking containers. But Pisco seems to be saying that your First Amendment should still be fully protected in an airport. Unless I missed something.
Many ways in which that investigation would be proper and justified because, you interpret those as true threats because of the lower amount of rights that people have in schools, the right of the schools to be secure. But if you funnel down that pathway, and you eventually got to the situation where, okay, he's not a true threat. He didn't mean that as a true threat. This is all protected speech. You couldn't burden this person additionally. I hope you agree with this, right? This person who worshiped the school shooters. You couldn't say, okay, this person who worshiped the school shooters after we've investigated that it's not a true threat or whatever. Now he's going to be subjected to additional security measures at airports. Could you?
Additional security measures at airports? No, because you investigated him to be not like a legitimate threat. He's just like really weird.
Okay, so now take the following situation, right? You support someone who supports Al-Qaeda. You say, I think Al-Qaeda is doing the right thing. I think America is a vicious empire. And yeah, I do think that terrorism is sometimes justified against imperialist forces. And you write a whole book about it. And you release that book, and then you leave the country, you're a US citizen, and come back. Is the government justified in stopping this person? Targeting him on his speech.
I think they could possibly be for just asking questions. Yeah, I think if they're just asking questions.
Okay, so I'll take it one step further and saying, okay, this person doesn't support Al-Qaeda, but they do support the Palestinians, and they do refer to October 7th. Okay, but they do think that October 7th was justified. Say October 7th was justified because that's an act of resistance.
I kind of draw the line at like, not like some esoteric idea of like resistance against this. It's if you say I have no issue with these terrorist groups enacting active, like, definitional acts of terrorism is actually justified. That's where I draw the line, where it's like, yeah, you know what? If you're going to say stuff like that, I think it's fine if at the airport they ask you a couple of questions.
So if someone says, I think October 7th was justified, the government is okay. It's okay for the government to target such people.
I would hope that it would be more than just that one statement. I would need more than just that one statement. In this case specifically, because we have a specific case in front of us with Hassan, he has built not only, it seems like a large chunk of his career off of this, but he's like doubling and tripling down. We have a individual that I would say there is, I would genuinely say, based on his conduct publicly, there is a fair idea that terrorists would target this guy for possible recruitment or figuring out ways for them to, like, in fact, I would wager almost certain.
Whoa, Max Copland, thanks for the tier 4 sub. What an incredibly generous subscription. What the fuck? I hope you enjoy it. Hope you enjoy the privilege. Wow, the full box. Where's the one ranger? Okay. Ooh. 4-star general. Hell yeah.
A terrorist group in the Middle East has attempted to make contact with Hassan. Almost certain. That is attempted to be happening. Almost certain. Almost
well, the fucking Luffy the Houthi invited him to Yemen.
Any indicia, right? So, like, this is the same rationale of the communist scare. I'll let you know, right? So there were American communists in this country in the 1950s and 60s, and further on, and there were a great deal of actions taken by this government to initiate investigations and saying, of course, there must have been contacted by someone from the Comintern or the international, communist groups. And on the basis of that, and communism was a real threat back in the day, right? Like they took over Czechoslovakia. The Iron Curtain was on the move. And so, and there actually were, by the way, many noted instances of espionage where they stole the atomic secrets. They stole the.
So I'm just going to say that this is a massive departure because there's a lot of historic stuff that we did that was illegitimate in our investigations and stomping up people's rights in
there's a reason when you refer back to McCarthyism, the example you'd never use is someone who got detained for at most 30 minutes and ask them questions about their fucking weird shit they say online.
Their support for communism or suspected support for communism. I don't believe you getting asked questions in a manner that is literally identical to random people walking through the airport, and that this happens incredibly frequently. I don't think having that happen to you is stomping on your rights. I mean, there's literally a die roll chance that that's going to happen to you no matter what. Like, we're not talking about like cops pulling them over.
About your political opinions? Well, you agree that he's asking about political opinions, right?
Say again?
You agree that he was asked about his political opinions?
Yeah, based on his retelling, he was asked about political opinions. Yeah.
When I do not think it's common for U.S. citizens coming abroad to come back and be asked about their political opinions. I don't think that's common.
I mean, I feel, what is it? Just typically like, where are you coming from? Stuff like that, right?
Yeah, that's not political, right? That's not a political opinion.
That's not political. Right? I don't know what invoked the conversation about his political opinions, though, because in the retelling of the story, he seems giddy about the idea. He said that he was ready to crack open how far that this line of dialogue could go.
We'll touch on that, and I do want to address that because I think people have misinterpreted that and taken the opposite interpretation of what I think they should be taking on that. But I want to talk about the hypotheticals some more. When I bring up the communist example, it's not to say that they're just this is the same exact thing on all fours or whatever. But it is to say that there is some basis to believe that if you publicly affiliate yourself or align yourself with communists, you probably are more likely to be approached by a communist, right? From the international Comintern. Sure. If you publicly align with Hamas or Hezbollah or the Houthis, I don't disagree. You're probably more likely to be approached by the Houthis.
He was publicly approached though, right? Potentially.
Yep. But you agree, like, it wouldn't be enough to get a warrant off of, right?
Correct.
And so, so we agree, right? Like there are certain deprivations on the basis of your state of belief that should not happen, right? So you agree, like
the thing that I'm saying is not a big deal is when you walk through the airport, them just saying, "Hey, what's up? Like, what's going on?"
Right. So but I just want to be clear about the things that you do grant, right? The reason you would not want him to be stopped on the basis of his stated view is because maybe it's not enough evidence for probable cause or whatever to know that he is doing some criminal activity with his other organization. But I assume it's also because it would be viewpoint discrimination, right? If you're arresting people because, and I know you've already granted this, but I just want to make it for the audience. But if you're arresting people because they support the Houthis, you would agree that that's viewpoint.
It was obvious Hassan was targeted for his beliefs. It absolutely was not obvious that he was targeted for his beliefs, because the first thing that he was told was that that there had been a check and he was going to go to get an interview. He waited in a room where he could apparently look at everyone's passports before going into the interview. So if you it's very possible that you could be randomly flagged, and then they would have his name and they could look him up to see if they wanted to do any kind of like cursory check. Then they find out that he's a political figure with a whole bunch of fucking articles about him, and then they would get questions from there. Or it was just a random check, and because of the answers he gave, they asked him elaboratory questions. So for example, if they said, "Oh, you stream, you do like video games, like politics. Oh, you do politics. What are your opinion on what do you think about like the last election?" Like this could all be just like naturally flowing from a conversation, or it could be something that was picked up after a random flag, but between the interviews. So even according to Hassan's version of the story, there's not definitive evidence of him being targeted for his opinions. We're just assuming he was because he said so, even though his version of the story doesn't actually make that definitive.
Viewpoint discrimination, right?
Yeah, that's illegitimate. That can't be done. Yeah.
Now, if you had a policy that said, for example, we're going to any Republican that crosses, because you're more likely to be a MAGA extremist who did violence on January 6th. All Republicans must be subject. This is the line for Republicans. And if you're a Republican, you have to come in this line and ask, answer.
For a random test, you wouldn't ask them if they support Trump. You would maybe if they were a fucking streamer. If they told you they were a political streamer, then they would obviously ask about politics, like if they wanted to. Again, I'm not saying they should do that. I'm not saying that's like a good follow-up question, but it does not necessarily imply that he was targeted beforehand. That might have just come up in the interview. So for example, when I tell the interviewer in Israel that I'm half Lebanese, they asked me, what do you think about like the conflict in Lebanon, Hezbollah, like why are you so interested in this conflict in particular? Yeah, they're asking these questions because of the answers I'm giving, because I'm telling them why I'm there and everything else. For what purpose? For the same purpose that they would ask you, where you were you traveling, business or pleasure, but so they can see if you reveal anything that can give them a more probing, they can put you into a line of questioning, which even by Hassan's version of the story, it fucking worked, because he's suddenly going out there being like not answering questions about fucking Hamas and everything, and then they're like, okay, well, let's talk more about that, shall we? Sometimes it can even just be like small talk about your job to relax you, I guess. I don't know. But I'm just saying that it doesn't give you definitive evidence that he was targeted for his views. Like, his version of the story doesn't make that definitive. They wouldn't ask anyone else what politician they like. How the fuck do you know? Okay, so you're just pretending now. You literally just made that the fuck up. You made that up out of fucking nowhere. You just invented that. How can you say something with such a level of like self-assuredness? I wish I could have the conviction that some people do. The luxury of being a chatter, eh? I don't think it's definitive. I'm just wary of the Trump admin. Yeah, me too. Don't need to be wary. Like, they're already doing mad shit to people at the border. But I'm also wary of Hassan because he's a fucking liar. So, conflict of interest. Known liar.
An additional 2 questions about whether you support MAGA extremists, whether or not you support the Proud Boys. You would be against that too, right?
Yeah, because it's too broad.
Okay. What if there were a separate line that said, do you support the Houthis? Everyone who has ever vocalized support for the Houthis, you must get into this line, and in this line you have to answer an additional 2 questions. That is, have you made contact with the Houthis?
You see the new insane poll of Israeli Jewish opinion. Yeah, we spoke about it earlier. Hello, person with new name who is definitely not someone who just remade an account. Yes, we saw it. We also saw that if you look at the Hebrew wording of the poll and the way it was translated into the article, there might be issues with it, but I am just awaiting verdicts. Because it seems to be that these pollsters can just extract any fucking opinion they want out of Israeli Jews. They can ask them if they want to give up, to end the war in exchange for the hostages, and like 70% of them will say yes. You can somehow also get the same population, apparently, to say that they want to genocide all the Gazans. Like, it's just fucking, something's going on here. Someone's doing something. Someone's being mischievous. We gotta find out who.
And are you planning to attack the United States? And so if you've ever vocalized...
What is the poll? Sophia, go into the Discord and go into, what do you call it? Look at this guy. Molding. Absolutely fucking molding. Go into, what do you call it? Go into Discord stream suggestions, Sophia. You'll get it there.
Support for the Houthis, come in this line. Would you be okay with that?
No.
Why not? Isn't that
Because
exactly
that's
what
not
you're alleging
sufficient.
has happened here?
You can support, and then you can fall off of support. You can do like whatever. I'm talking.
What he's saying is a lie. I have no idea. The poll question that I was referring to was Israelis were asked, would you accept releasing all the hostages now if it means the war against Hamas ends? And 70% said yes, 69 to be exact. A majority of coalition voters said that as well. And that person said liar, 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 liar. Absolutely molding.
Talking about this guy not only supporting the Houthis, supporting specific actual acts of terrorism, supporting several different terrorist groups, consistently like using his like platform specifically to talk about these issues. It's not incidental. Because when you're talking about, have you ever supported the Houthis? Bro, there's like random people who work at the fucking subway who support the Houthis, right? Just like in a random Discord chat randomly. We're talking about like consistent, persistent support, not only for them, but multiple different groups. And that guy just getting asked a couple of questions at the airport, I don't think we're stepping on his rights.
No, what you're, hang on a second. So whether or not the deprivation is a big deal is a different question, right? So like it could be.
The poll you're referring to is just propaganda. Which one? The genocide one or the end the war one?
Right? That someone stops you for a minute because you supported the Houthis in the past, even if it's a minute or even if it's a couple
the end the war one.
If the
Is it? Okay. Why? Fucking. Yesterday came out proper polls. Check them out. Okay. Let me send you a link. Go ahead. The funny thing about this is, like, based on my own experience with Israelis and like Israeli media, the thing is that, like, and it shouldn't be the case, but neither of these results would even surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me if a majority of, like, an overwhelming majority of them supported the forced relocation. But it also wouldn't surprise me if a bunch of them thought they wanted to end the war to release the hostages. Like, because you see the popularity of the protesters, like the polling changing across parties, but also just the general fucking insanity about the Israeli population. So it's like, you not being surprised means very little. Elad, you are being very hostile, okay? Chill. Holy fuck. Ooh.
Policy amounts to viewpoint discrimination, you'd say it's a big deal, right? Regardless.
Well,
so if you thought that this,
I want to be specific. I have no issues with the actual, like, just the Merriam-Webster's definition of viewpoint discrimination, as per my hypothetical about the cop stopping a person who they just saw a social media post of totally First Amendment protected speech of shit that makes them feel like they're about to do something crazy in a public area. I think a cop should look out for their community and be like, hey man, what's going on? You all right? Like, what's this? What are we doing here? What's this about? Do you need, like, help? What's going on? I have literally no issue with that. Genuinely. Right now, in fact, actually, I would make a separate argument. I think the cop is right for doing that. I would hope cops do that. If they actually believe that there might be a threat to the public safety like that, I would hope that they look at your protected speech and just say, hey,
right? That's the difference, right? So we're talking about here are two different things.
Okay.
So if the purpose of the cop is not viewpoint discrimination, it's to stop a threat, right? It's to stop an imminent threat, and on the basis of this person, he's in the public area and he's made those beliefs, and he has no countervailing belief to know that this person is not a risk. If the purpose of the cop is to go ask this person some questions, as a means of investigating whether this person is an active threat right now, an imminent threat to the public order, it combined with the fact that he's supposing that he has the means to do so in that area, right? And he's actively present in that area, and it's consistently like co-aligning with things he said in the past before. Then I think that the purpose of him doing the questioning, although I don't know if a stop would be justified. Do you think a stop would be justified? That is to say, a detainment, or just being like, hey, can I ask you some questions? That would be justified, but not like.
I think it would depend on the evidence, but in general, I don't think a detainment would be. I think it would just like a random questioning.
Yeah. So the only reason a detainment would be the only reason a detainment would be proper here is because there's this exception at the border that you can like detain people, right? And you don't need to have probable cause or a warrant to detain people at the border. But if, notwithstanding that you don't need a probable cause or a warrant to detain people at the border, there could still be illegitimate stops at the border. And we've already gone through some, right? Racially motivated stops at the border, religiously motivated stops at the border.
The reason why racially motivated stops is wrong is because of the level of separation. Let's say there was a single black person on Earth, one. And you got a report that was said that a black person was carrying a bomb into the airport, and you see a black person in the airport. I think it's fine to do a bit of racial discrimination then, because we're not picking up a needle in a haystack at that point.
Right. Yeah, no. So I agree with that.
So it has to do with the reasonability in connection. So. But just to be clear,
so what is your evidence? What is your evidence? What is your evidence that people who support the Houthis publicly are more likely to commit crimes, or to commit the specific crime
more likely to commit crimes? Well, my argument isn't that just simply anybody who supports the Houthis is more likely to commit crimes. My argument is to do because, as per the example, Well, hold on. I want to get back to that because what I'm going to respond to is you talked about the Houthi line or whatever, and I said no to that hypothetical anyway. But the you were talking about, well, the cop has is the purpose of the cop for that stop is to protect public safety. The CBP officer would be, in theory, stopping Hassan for the exact.
Wait, is there not this Haaretz poll? Is there not like a fucking English version of it, or is it only the Hebrew version translated? Is only the Hebrew version through Google Translate? Okay. Only the Hebrew. Interesting. Okay. Why would Haaretz do that? Throw it in Chat GBT. Don't know. Hang on.
Exact same reason, because he's worried about the public safety of like terrorist contact. Maybe he.
You had a Hebrew-speaking loner quarter translate. Okay, I'm gonna do this. Fuck me. Oh. Only Sundowner can translate it. Yeah, the operative himself. Should I be looking for a group for this 5-man at 11 in the morning server time? Okay, I don't know.
He's trying to commit some kind of attack.
Yes, I know it was a Penn State poll. I know. It's just the article reporting on it is from Haaretz.
Or something like that. I think that's totally illegitimate. From my understanding, I don't think there's any reasonable grounds to believe that Hassan would commit to a terrorist attack, like in any real way. But that would, I believe, be the purpose.
So there are two things here. So one is, I think that that's not the purpose of the policy. I think the policy is to chill people who have those particular views and to chill people who support or don't support Israel. So I disagree. I think the policy is not a legitimate policy of trying to funnel out crimes and to stop crime. I think that this is in line with the policy they're doing with like the green card holder Ozturk, right? What is it? Why are they doing what they're doing with the green card holder Ozturk and with these individuals? Is it because they think that those people are likely to commit crimes? No, it's because they want to chill speech that's pro Palestine and anti-Israel. That's the purpose of why they're doing it. But even if I granted that this cop particularly, he actually had this legitimate fear and was actually security purpose, I would say that you would need to have more than just the stated view, right? In the context of the person stopping the individual in the public place, it's not just that he stated the view before that he supports these individuals, but it's that he's there, right? And he has the means in that moment to be an imminent threat. And he's present in that area.
You don't have a means for. Wait, you don't know if that person has a means for an explosive. You don't know if Hassan has the means for an explosive either.
In that time period, there's some level of indicia. He's in a crowd, right? In that crowd, if it's a legitimate security rationale, yeah. But what is Hassan likely to do a crime attendant to his presence with an airport? Right?
From my personal knowledge, no. He's like Hassan is not going to commit any crimes. No.
Right. There's nothing about the airport and his presence in the airport that's linked to the kind of investigation that's undergoing by the people.
Okay, if you want to come in and talk about the polls, the Haaretz one, I mean, with the wording of it in Hebrew, you can let me know now. Okay, I'm in Discord.
People at the airport. The only reason they're using the airport to do it is because they know that they don't need to have a warrant or probable cause to stop people. But there's nothing specific about the airport which is triggering this investigation of Hassan, who has a fundamental right to enter the country, right? And so again, I want to stress there's kind of two components to what I'm talking about. Number one, the purpose. If the purpose is to chill speech, which I believe it is here because that's part of the and would you agree with that before I move on? Do you agree that this administration is trying to chill speech in favor against Israel? They are trying to chill that speech across the board, right?
I don't know if that's their explicit purpose, but I guarantee that they like that outcome. I would
what?
I would say an alternative
What's
idea
the purpose
for
in rejecting the green card and trying to deport Rameza Ozturk and trying to deport Mahmoud Khalil, if not to chill speech in favor of Israel?
Well, I legitimately think, and I've met a lot of conservatives who think this way too. I think they might legitimately think that those people are terrorist sympathizers that do not belong in the country. They actually think that. And that they have the legal authority to remove them.
Oh my God.
I don't necessarily agree with the idea that they're like, no, we don't actually think that they're like like terrorist sympathizers. We're just trying to make
Well,
sure not many people talk like this in that manner. I would say the chill speech is. Go ahead.
They believe they are terrorist sympathizers, right? Or let's say that that's what they believe.
Just sit in the waiting room. I'll get you in a minute. Fuck.
And they're trying to discourage people from sympathizing terrorists, right? They're trying to show the administration.
To be clear, from that perspective, what they're trying, their main motive is to get terrorists out from their view.
Okay. So you don't think that they're actually trying to make people less inclined to do these kinds of protests?
No, I believe that they're probably intending to make them less inclined to do the protests. But
yes, exactly.
I think the
so
main
that's chill speech,
purpose,
right? That's chill speech. Is that chill speech?
Yes, like I said, I don't disagree that they're chilling speech and that they probably like that aspect of chilling speech. But for me, like specifically, when we're talking about like whether or not it's chilling speech, I don't see that as being the like necessary primary motive.
Is that at least one purpose? Is at least one
that
purpose
is a very
of the administration?
significant. They believe that pro-Palestinian speech is pro-terrorist speech, and they are attempting to crack down on what they believe, therefore, is pro-terrorist speech. Yes.
Okay, cool. So that's one thing. So I think that there is at least a significant policy rationale for a lot of what the administration doing is for the specific purpose of chilling pro-Palestine speech and chilling anti-Israel speech, and that I believe is in their statements. That's what they're doing, and that's what they're going after is specifically people who've made those kinds of statements. And so I do believe that's one of the purposes. But so that's one thing is the purpose.
So let's
I'm about to connect it to Hassan.
So let's connect this to Hassan because I think this is wildly not the case for the Hassan situation.
Okay.
So the reason why is because I think it would be really, really phenomenal, the idea that the CBP officer, they don't believe that Hassan is an actual threat. Like in the hypothetical that he knows who Hassan is, and he tries to get him aside for questioning, specifically because he knows who he is, specifically because of his viewpoints. I feel like it would be so incredibly unlikely that officer is pulling him aside so he doesn't talk about Israel Palestine as much, so he feels less comfortable talking about it, and not because he was worried that Hassan might be a legitimate threat.
Okay, rally.
That feels ungodly unlikely.
10 tidy toes down.
Let me connect it. So, but I just want to put out the framework.
Connect it,
so
Pisco.
there's two things. One is the purpose. If the purpose is the chill speech, I take that to be discriminatory by definition and illegitimate. So if one of the purposes is the chill speech, that's enough. However, if there's some other purpose, such as a criminal investigation, such as security purpose, and all you're doing.
Did you hear Westside Tyler's whole conspiracy theory? On what? That might be interesting. I'm still feeling very, very bad for him that he got outed as a dastardly Iraq war vet. And now his new lefty friends that he used to actually make fun of a year ago, interestingly enough, to get clout, I guess. Now he realized the clout train's going the other way. LeMayo, not mad LeMayo. That is him, yes. Chris Hunter was suggesting the shooting was a false flag. No shot. Say, what's your name in Discord? I'll do it right now. Semilink, if that little bastard is calling it a false flag, there's no way. I think he probably would have said something like, this would be the perfect false flag because it basically, gives carte blanche for Trump to crush civil liberties or some shit. Like, that's probably what he was saying, right? Oh, someone just DM'd me in WoW to say they are a big fan of the show. Thank you so much. If they can hear me. Bah! Wasn't Hassan flirting with false flag? Hassan was doing the classic Hassan strategy of This is definitely not a false flag. I'm never going to call this a false flag, but it has all the hallmarks of a false flag. But I'd never say it's a false flag. That's the Hassan method, right?
Health warning.
It doesn't. It looks like some radicalized retard thought that he could solve problems by killing Jews. You know? Wow. Really? That's never happened before. What? In the name of Palestine, no less. Really? You'd never, until then, you'd never convince me that someone ever thought that killing Jews would save Palestine. First time ever that's been a thing.
Health warning.
The fuck?
Health
Fuck!
warning.
Ew. Don't do 400 damage on me. Thank you.
Health warning.
Noah Samson's slandering the victims. Yeah. What do we have here? Mike from PA. Fat Mike. The guy who's actually quite difficult to citizen's arrest because he never leaves his house. And has a very low center of gravity. So it'd be difficult to move him, to shift him.
It is absolutely perfect timing for Israel.
He's quite greasy as well, you know. He would just slide away from you.
And they attacked low-level staffers. It is absolutely perfect timing for Israel. And they attacked low-level staffers. You know what I mean? It's like perfect timing for Israel and attacks people that are expendable. They aren't even, they're Christians. The Christians.
She was Jewish, and he had a Jewish father. And also, there's no indication so far that the shooter was targeting anyone in particular, but just the event. The event at the Jewish Museum. The event at the Jewish Museum, which was a Jewish networking event. Stop conflating Zionism with Judaism, guys. So bad.
Zionists get killed. Completely expendable for the Israeli state. It is like, it's perfect. It's almost like it's designed. It's almost like it's crazy.
Wow. Low level says the Kingmaker Fat Mike. Built like a king. Okay, what else? Where's the, Fuck! Say, okay. Let me do an unban on Discord.
Is you're proxying speech, and there's no other indicia of any threat or any criminal activity. I also take that to be problematic. That is to say, for example, let's say you legitimately want to stop security threats, and you believe that the best way to do that is to like stop Muslims additionally or something, or is to stop Republicans, and you legitimately believe that, like you really think that Republicans are more of a threat by like 5x. Let's say you really think that Republicans, and you have the data that, you know, Republicans or black people are 5x the percentage likely to commit these crimes or to be the security threats. Notwithstanding the fact that you legitimately think that this is connected to the likelihood of propensity to crime, I think you, even though the burden, the standard for starting an investigation or asking questions is very, very low, if all you have is that proxy to either...
You might have misremembered what Chris said. Wow. You almost made me watch him for no fucking reason. I guess we'll watch him anyway, you know, free speech. Do we really need to insult Mike based on his weight? Is that really the objectionable thing about him? For 99% of people, I would say you should never attack someone for immutable characteristics, like out of fucking nowhere, right? Even if they're mean to you. The problem with Mike is that he attacks people like below the belt all the fucking time, so I don't care. Like you're sorry, like you get in the fucking mud pit, you're gonna get mud on you. The fuck?
Protected speech, protected class, that kind of thing, then I think we have problems, and then I think it's still problematic, even if you do have a security purpose.
So let's suppose a separate hypothetical then of the same example, because I don't really agree. but maybe you'll get me there on this separate hypothetical.
Okay.
Of the person who's making pretty
Didn't
reasonable
he
threats.
also used to attack Vosh for being fat? Didn't he? I didn't make that up, did I? Might need a clip, just to be sure. So on behalf of past Fat Ian, okay? Everything I did was for Vouch. Okay.
Public location, right? But they're not in the public location. The cops get a call about as somebody who's worried about this person. The cops take a look at their social media feed or whatever and listen to some of the statements made. The statements are worrying, but they're just in their house. Do you think it's improper for the cops to go to that person's house and just ask them questions?
Yeah, so I think that it would be fine for the cop to go over there,
Health
and
warning.
because there and or to either to call this person, because
Jay!
the statements there could
Health warning.
reasonally be construed as a threat.
they're humanoids, I can cannibalize them.
And
Wow.
they're therefore not protected speech, right? Threats are not protected speech. But after having conducted that investigation, right, going to the house, asking him or calling him based on what could be interpreted as unprotected speech, all right, that is to say, the reasonable threat to the public place, which absolutely could be interpreted as.
Well, no. I'm what I'm articulating isn't like a reasonable, like, correct me if I'm wrong, a reasonable standard of a threat to a public place is actually a pretty high bar. Like, it's not just like I can say like, man, I wish a bunch of people went into downtown Chicago and just were like beating the shit out of each other. I wish that I could take a hammer and just beat the shit out of people in downtown Chicago.
Wow.
That's not like a reasonable threat.
And that's
that
all you
then
have,
would,
right?
Huh?
And that's all you have, right?
That's all I have.
Health warning.
Yeah, so I think you know, maybe there's some sort of it's a low threshold, right? It's a low threshold.
It's also just about being consistent. There are no bad tactics, only bad targets, or do we not believe that? You're not listening to what I'm saying. It's not about bad tactics or bad targets. Attacking someone's weight is a bad tactic, okay? But you're literally talking about someone who is like, I want to get in and I want to fight with bad tactics. I'm going to get in the ring and we're playing bad tactics rules. Like, yeah. He consents.
So I in general think that the cops have no business inquiring with people about their protected speech, except to the extent that there's some connection to some legitimate purpose. For example, let's say the cop said something like this: "Don't say that," right? We don't like it when you say that thing, right? We think that's bad for you to say, and it's not an exercise of.
The other point is that people might catch strays. Not that it's against Mike. Yeah, you know, that's the whole political correctness thing, isn't it? Kind of makes sense. Just to be clear, I don't call him Fat Mike because I have a problem with overweight people. I don't. People want to live the way they want to, go for it. The reason I call him Fat Mike is because he is insecure about weight in a way that he has used it to attack other people in the past. He used to attack Vosh for being fat. So it's like, bro, if you're going to play by those rules, you get what's coming to you. I don't know. That's not even to mention the ways, like the means he uses to attack me. So, fucking...
their speech. Oh, it's not you know maybe I could see a cop asking a favor, say, hey, would you mind not saying that to our town, and in which case I would take that to be an exercise of their speech. But in general, I would be against the police taking.
They're strange like that. Hassan will call Nick the Oreo fat all day, but when someone calls Frogan fat, make it make sense. Yeah, it's just fucking hypocrites, you know? Although the better argument there could be that you could argue, but you can't really. Is like if the Oreo called Frogan fat without any like standard like that set by her, and then Hassan calls the Oreo fat in response. You know what I mean? Because calling Frogan fat for no fucking reason would be a problem. Because as far as I know, I don't think Frogan goes to that space when she attacks people, does she? Unless you want to count saying that she wants veterans to get PTSD, but that's like a very different style, I guess, of insult. She attacked Stardust. She said Star was ugly. Oh well, fair game then.
So sort of official measures that impose burdens on that individual, if they're imposing burdens on that individual on the basis of protected speech.
Yeah, then I guess we would probably just
Stardust started it. Did Stardust ever make fun of Frogan's looks? That's the question, Missy.
good.
There could be some edge cases where, like, okay, placing a call to an individual outside of the context. This is not an interrogation. Remember, I am construing this as a detainment, a detainment that is imposing a burden, and questions that do impose a burden. And so it's a very different context, I think, than like a simple checkup outside of the context of an interrogation, which is questioning under detainment.
Well, no, because a cop asking you a series of questions about troubling statements, I think would have any reasonable person under the assumption they're detained. So I think it would qualify under detainment as you defined it at the beginning.
No, I don't. No,
fucking
no,
wolf
I don't.
bastards, man.
So
God.
the detainment is when someone is in reasonable apprehension, in my opinion, that they are not free to go. And so questions outside of the context of detainment. So if a cop comes into your house and says, hey, can I ask you some questions? I don't believe that a reasonable person would think that they're detained. I don't believe that. No.
So no. I'm talking about if a cop walks up to you and is like, hey, you made some crazy posts on social media. Can I ask you some questions about, like, hey, I want to go to downtown Chicago and beat the shit out of people?
I don't think most people think that. I don't think most people think that they're detained.
You
in that
think
context.
if a cop walks up to a person, and asks you about a post that you made on Facebook about how you want to beat the shit out of people in a public place, you don't think most people would interpret that as like you're not free to just walk away from that and say, no, I don't care, walk away?
Absent some command from the officer, absent some drawing of a firearm, absent him saying, hey, step aside over here as a command in a particular tone of voice. Again, it's kind of like a totality of circumstances test, but I don't think the mere walking up to a person, asking them a question about a thing constitutes reasonable apprehension that you are not free to go. I don't believe that. No, I think the case law probably supports me on that, and I'll have to check into that. But all that is to say is when someone is clearly detained and subjected to question, I view that as a kind of a different situation than someone who, a cop, going online, looking at some things, maybe giving that person a call, showing up to their house to ask them a few questions. I view that as a different in the sense of the burden, but also just additionally, just to be a trillion quadruple % clear. In the case of the individual who made those kind of problematic but protected statements about that someone could interpret as a danger to like a public area, I don't believe that individuals should be subjected to burdens on those statements, right? I don't think that they should be if they're protected speech, and they should not be subjected to
this fucking music,
additional checks at the airport because of their protected speech by the government.
Okay, I mean, I think that I think it really depends on how reasonable it is to interpret whether or not that protected speech aligns with some credible threat to public safety. I think that in general, the bar is going to be really, really high for the types of speech I would say is warranting, right? Like for the Houthi line, I don't think a Houthi line would warrant it or anything like that. But
wait, so let's talk about the empirics here. So
okay, where is this conversation going? I'm not sure it's going anywhere. What else is there to watch though? Fuck. Ah! Fucking Big Bird. This quest is like ultimate fucking cringe though. It's so shit. Pisco has a lot of time in his hands for a lawyer.